I recently started a series where I'm going for hard platinum trophies, and holy are my regrets at an all-time high right now. My first video in the series covered 3 games, Vanquish, Cuphead, and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. After I conquered these first 3 games, I think I maybe got a little overconfident in myself because I decided to take it up a notch.
Taking it up a notch.
With video number 2. After a Discord poll, regret number 1, selected Devil May Cry 5 as my next hard platinum, I thought, okay, I know that's a tough game, but I've seen a lot of people earn this platinum, so how hard can it really be? Well, extremely hard. I knew Devil May Cry 5 was already going to be a big time sink, but did that deter me from self-inflicting further emotional damage?
Absolutely not.
Regret number 2. I was committed at this point, so I quickly decided on the other 2 games I plan to tackle. For game number 2, I went with Armored Core 6, which is not known to be a difficult platinum in comparison to some of these others, but it's a From Software game, so it's not exactly an easy game or a quick platinum, and I felt like it was a good option to balance out the high difficulty I was expecting from Devil May Cry 5. And for game number 3, this one's not on my original list, but it is an 8 out of 10 difficulty. It's been on my backlog for over 15 years now, and that is the underappreciated PS3 platformer, Mirror's Edge. And so with that, let's get right into it so I can describe this painful experience and explain why exactly it took so long to get through these 3 games. I have a brief but memorable history with the Devil May Cry franchise. Prior to Devil May Cry 5, I had only played one game in the franchise, and that was Devil May Cry 3, Dante's Awakening on PS2, which I rented for a couple days from the local game store. I must have been like 14 at the time, and at that time I was more into games like Grand Theft Auto, NFL 2K, and God of War. God of War being a hack and slash was probably the closest thing to Devil May Cry I had played at the time. And it's probably what drew me to the game based on what I could tell from looking at the front and back of the case. Again, this was before smartphones, so I couldn't just pull up the trailer to see what I was getting myself into. Nothing I had experienced playing God of War could prepare me for the experience of Devil May Cry 3. And I remember Devil May Cry 3 just being so uniquely difficult. I barely made it through some of the early bosses, and I eventually came up against 2 bosses at once, which I think is like the 4th official boss encounter in the game, and they just bullied me over and over again. I'd never faced 2 bosses at once before, and so I tried quite a few times, but after numerous failures, I just decided, this isn't my kind of game. And so I returned it, never to experience another Devil May Cry game again until January 1st, 2025. Devil May Cry 5 is, as the name suggests, the 5th main entry of the franchise, which got its start all the way back in 2001 with the original Devil May Cry on PlayStation 2. For the bulk of the series, you play as Dante, a handsome, charismatic, stylish, and powerful demon hunter who happens to be half demon himself. He is the son of Sparta. Sparta was an ancient demon/certified badass that saved humanity from some even more evil demons a few thousand years back. Dante has a very casual and nonchalant way about him. He demonstrates impressive power and technical ability with various melee weapons and firearms, while casually insulting his enemies.
Is it Halloween already?
And downplaying the dangers surrounding him. He's aware of his immense power and doesn't seem to take the demonic invasion that's occurring around him as a threat as much as an entertaining chore to be dealt with. Now, your primary objective in most Devil May Cry games is to kill demons. Sounds simple, and really that is largely what the series is about, is killing demons. The series emphasizes stylistic combat, and you're rewarded for performing long and complicated combos involving a wide variety of weapons and skills. Each game has a host of tough boss battles, and the series is known for its punishing gameplay where even normal enemies can pose a challenge. Each game also comes with a multitude of different difficulty modes that alter the gameplay experience by making the playable character more fragile or making enemies stronger and more aggressive. And there's even modes where one hit means instant death. In Devil May Cry 5, Dante returns as expected, but you'll also play as two additional protagonists, Nero and V. Of the three playable characters, Dante has the largest arsenal of available weapons and can even alter between 4 separate fighting styles, each with its own set of moves tailored to a specific style of combat. The player can actually toggle between these 4 styles mid-combat using the D-pad. Our second playable character, Nero, was first introduced in Devil May Cry 4, and he adds a lot of new options for combat encounters due to his unique arsenal of Devil Breakers. Devil Breakers are the detachable weapons/tools that take the place of Nero's right arm, which is missing for reasons explained later on in the story. This transformation allows Nero to juggle and slay demons with a level of proficiency that would make the Doom Slayer blush. You'd think a one-armed man would struggle against massive demonic giants, but Nero's Devil Breakers even the playing field and make him a fun character to play, but a hard one to master. Each Devil Breaker provides a different set of abilities, from slowing time to firing out projectiles or even providing mobility enhancements. The game leaves it entirely up to you which Devil Breakers and therefore combat style you want to favor. V is a mysterious, emo-looking guy who teams up with Nero in the opening mission of the game. At the start of the game, it's unclear what V's purpose is from a narrative perspective. However, by the end of the game, V becomes an integral component of the Devil May Cry storyline. V's combat is entirely dependent upon his familiars, which are 3 demonic pets that he can summon with specific button inputs. V doesn't actually engage in combat himself, except for striking the killing blow, and much of his combat amounts to button mashing the pet attacks while you watch from a safe distance. The combat experience with V is a sharp contrast to the combat you experience with Nero and Dante, who rely heavily on in-your-face sword thrusts, grappling, and juggling of enemies. For most of the game, like I said, you're killing demons, whether it's with Dante, Nero, or V. The game's narrative climax occurs in the final quarter of the game, and a character well known to fans of the series is reintroduced. Where Devil May Cry 5 really excels is in its combat, and I think that's always been the case with this series. It's always excelled in its combat and its hack and slash gameplay. The story isn't terrible, but it's not what draws most people to the series. I won't completely spoil it, but I will say that Devil May Cry 5 has similar characters, themes, and gameplay to previous entries in the series. So fans who are into the story will still enjoy watching the world and the characters develop even further. It's fun to play and hard to master, but rewarding to beat. Lastly, it looks and runs great. I had very few, if any, technical issues while playing, even on the PS4. This game is also available on PS5. PS4 load times were a bit annoying since you'll be restarting a lot of missions over and over while going for S ranks. So unfortunately, you're going to spend quite a bit of time in load screens, but the PS5 version largely eliminates this problem. I will come right out and say that this is legitimately one of the hardest platinums I've ever earned. And it was the first game since probably Injustice back in August 2024 that had me questioning if I could actually earn the platinum. I knew this was a difficult series, but my god, the platinum makes it 10 times more difficult than just beating the game a single time. As somebody who's played a lot of games in the past 30 years, Devil May Cry 5 is not an unusually difficult game when played on the starting difficulty, but the difficulty of the platinum is just leaps and bounds above what you would experience just casually playing through the game. Even beating the game on harder difficulties is not super difficult because the game gives you a seemingly infinite number of continues provided you have either red orbs or gold orbs, both of which are pretty easy to get. The game's platinum, however, is very difficult because it requires you to master 3 separate playable characters across a moderately long main story including some boss fights that are tough to perfect. Devil May Cry 5 has 6, yes, 6 different difficulty modes, and the Platinum requires you to earn an S rank on every mission on 5 of those 6 difficulties. That's 21 missions across 5 difficulties for a total of 105 S ranks. To earn an S rank, you must obtain a specific amount of style points by the end of the mission. The amount of style points needed for an S rank will vary by difficulty, and you earn style points by chaining together unique combos and avoiding damage during a fight. If you use the same attack over and over again, your style points will suffer. Likewise, if you die or get hit a bunch, this will also hurt your style points. 2 of these difficulty modes, Dante Must Die and Hell in Hell, sit above the rest in terms of difficulty. Dante Must Die mode nerfs your damage to enemies by 50% and increases your damage taken by 300%, and these effects are doubled when the enemy is in Devil Trigger. Yes, that's right, in this mode, enemies including bosses can activate their own Devil Trigger and enter an enraged state that gives them significant damage and stun resistance. This makes every single enemy more aggressive and substantially harder to kill. Green and white orbs are almost non-existent in this mode, so you have to manage your health and Devil Trigger very carefully. In this mode, you die quickly, so a few seconds of inattentiveness or pressing the wrong button can quickly ruin an S rank. Hell in Hell is the other challenging difficulty mode in this game. Hell in Hell is a one-hit death mode that gives you 3 golden orbs or lives. Each hit or death uses up one of the 3 orbs, and if you die with no gold orbs left, you fail the mission and have to restart from the beginning. That sounds harder than the previous difficulty that I talked about, but actually Hell in Hell is easier than Dante Must Die mode in some cases. Even though you die in one hit, enemies are less aggressive, they have less health, and so they die quicker. And so as a result, you're spending less time surrounded by dangerous enemies, there's fewer opportunities to get hit and lose style points or die, and your runs are generally quicker because you're cutting through enemies faster, so it doesn't feel as tedious. Each playable character, Dante, Nero, and V, has roughly 5 to 8 missions to complete and S rank per difficulty. V is generally the easiest character to get S ranks with, since it's easy to build up high style points using the auto assist setting. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And it's also easy to avoid damage with V. Dante has some very overpowered weapons that make some of the combat encounters trivial. However, this drastically reduces your style points, so for a lot of these S ranks you need to avoid any damage at all. Nero is probably the hardest character to get S ranks with because he doesn't really have any overpowered abilities or weapons, and the auto assist setting is not nearly as effective with him as it is with V, and so you will need to be well versed in Nero's weapons, attack skills, and devil breakers, and will also need to be proficient at juggling enemies in the air while maintaining stylish combos in order to obtain the S ranks with Nero. In some of these missions, it's simply not enough just to get through them without dying or even without getting hit. You actually have to do it with some style. The Nero S ranks are really what made this Platinum so difficult for me personally, and I think a lot of other players as well. There are a couple well-known exploits that can be used to make this Platinum experience a little less painful. For example, if you're trying to earn S ranks on Dante Must Die difficulty, you can quickly close application if you happen to get hit too much or die, and your style points drop. This will reset you back at the last checkpoint and restore your style points to what they were when you reached that checkpoint. For some dumbass reason, I was too proud and stubborn to use this method. I wanted to do it all without save scumming my progress, and it turned a hard thing into a much harder thing. Any big mistakes halfway through a Dante Must Die run meant starting it completely over. This undoubtedly added many hours to my platinum time, but this could be avoided if you don't have any pride. Another exploit, which I did in fact take advantage of since it was purely a matter of time savings and not a means to avoid a specific challenge, is using a cloud save to preserve red orbs. Now, red orbs are the in-game currency in Devil May Cry 5 and are also used as ammunition to fire one of Dante's weapons, Dr. Faust. Dr. Faust is a hat. No, really, it's literally a hat, and it burns through red orbs at an incredible rate. I was using a ton of red orbs trying to complete the Dante mission, so instead of farming red orbs for hours and hours and hours, I would upload a cloud save, back up my red orbs, and if I failed multiple times with Dante, I would just reload the cloud save to return my lost orbs. It's a useful exploit to speed up the platinum, which doesn't allow me to skip any challenging parts of the platinum. I kind of equate this to save scumming for multiple endings like in Sekiro. I'm still completing all the difficult parts of the platinum, I'm just not mindlessly farming red orbs for an extra 10 hours. I also mentioned auto assist, which is another exploit that is available in the game. It's a setting that can be turned on with the R3 button, and it automatically chains combos together for you. It's pretty handy, very, very powerful setting, but it also reduces your style point multiplier by 20%. So that means you're going to have to get more style points with that setting on in order to obtain the S rank. While playing with V specifically, you can build a very high style rating using auto assist, so for V it's definitely worth using even though you get the reduction in score multiplier. After 70 hours of playtime, while trying to chip away at the 105 S ranks, I found myself extremely frustrated, annoyed, and stuck. I was attempting the same S ranks over and over and over again and continuously failing. I'd switch to another mission and try to S rank that one instead, just to fail there repeatedly too. Entire afternoons would go by where I wouldn't earn a single S rank. I was losing motivation and confidence and decided to change games for a few weeks before coming back. And I highly recommend this strategy to anybody struggling through a game. I know there's sometimes a pressure, whether internal or external, to finish a game as soon as possible, but sometimes taking a break from a hard game allows me personally to come back to it more relaxed, more focused, and oftentimes I find it much easier to beat a section that previously held me up. So if you're ever struggling through a game, I highly recommend you take a break, whether it's a day, a week, a month. Come back to it later on and see if you don't play more relaxed and more focused. I bet it will help you get through that obstacle that had you stuck. And so I came back to Devil May Cry 5 in early February, and honestly I was still struggling a lot. But as I continued to practice more and more, especially with Nero, the S ranks started to come. I also changed my controller layout to allow for easier combos, which actually is suggested in the guide, but unfortunately it took me 70 hours to heed that incredibly valuable advice. Learning how to juggle enemies was the key for me with Nero. By juggling enemies, it keeps your style points up while also keeping distance between you and other enemies. While playing with Dante, like I said, I of course used Dr. Faust, which is an incredibly powerful weapon that uses red orbs as ammunition. Dr. Faust has some attacks that can actually one-shot some of the bosses at the cost of a very large number of red orbs. This makes encounters very easy, but unfortunately does not offer a lot in the way of style points. So typically to get an S rank using this method, you need to beat the level without getting hit. Now, in my original rules, I did say I would try to avoid cheesing bosses, but I also made the distinction that if it's a weapon or skill in the game, then it's fair game. I didn't jump to an inaccessible part of the map to avoid damage or glitch a boss in order for him to fall off a ledge and die instantly. I just used a very overpowered weapon that the game deliberately emphasizes with a very thrilling cutscene halfway through the game. And it's also somewhat balanced by an incredibly high red orb cost. This weapon is expensive to use. But yes, I did use it. I will not try and pretend like I am amazing at this game, even though I got the platinum. I spent so many hours failing S ranks and even Bloody Palace from the DLC. I felt like the platinum was a lot harder for me than it would be for the average hard platinum trophy hunter. When I hit the wall around hour 70, I was questioning whether or not I could complete this platinum. But I couldn't just make a series about hard platinum trophies and then give up by the second video. But believe me, there were definitely points where I dreaded playing this game because I just knew I was going to be failing a lot more before I succeeded. Progress on this platinum was very slow. While the guide has this listed at around 70 hours for platinum, this platinum took me 131 hours, so pretty close to double. Roughly 20 to 30 of those hours was spent on DLC, so the 130 hours is not completely accurate. For difficulty, I have to give this a 9 out of 10 personally. The guide has it marked at an 8 out of 10, but this was significantly harder than most of the other 8 out of 10s that I've completed. So I have to give it at least a 9. I know there will be harder games I'll be playing, so I don't want to give it the 10 out of 10, but it's definitely one of my hardest and proudest platinums. The difficulty of this platinum boils down to one trophy, and that's Worthy of Legend, and that's the one for clearing all the missions with an S rank on all difficulties except for Heaven or Hell. These of course do not stack, so you literally have to S rank all 21 missions on 5 separate difficulties. 2 of these difficulty modes, Dante Must Die and Hell in Hell, are what really will test your abilities. There are also a couple dozen collectibles related to health and Devil Trigger upgrades that will be required for the platinum, and for getting through some of the harder difficulties. And all of these could be found naturally through a little bit of exploration, but they're easily found using a video guide. The trophy list for Devil May Cry 5 is pretty self-explanatory. There's only a couple trophies with a vague description where it might not be totally obvious what you need to do to earn it, but most of the trophies could be figured out without the use of a guide. However, most players should absolutely expect to use some kind of guide for obtaining all the S ranks, unless you just naturally put in a few hundred hours into the game and master it entirely. There are some tried and true methods to perfect and manipulate the game's combat system to make these S ranks much easier. So if you're going into this platinum completely blind, then this is going to be a very, very harrowing experience for you, and I will keep you in my thoughts. Guides for Devil May Cry 5 will recommend that you change your controller layout for easier management of charged attacks and combos. And there are many instances, especially during boss fights, where a specific attack or strategy is incredibly effective. So it's definitely worthwhile looking through a guide if you're struggling with the S ranks. The rest of the platinum, you probably don't need to worry too much about using a guide. I don't even have to think about this one. Yes, absolutely, this is a top 10 hardest platinum for me. It's even a top 5 hardest platinum, so my top 10 list from November is already severely outdated, and I'm only on video number 2. I put this platinum difficulty on par with Injustice and Vanquish, and honestly, it might be higher than both of those. The platinum doesn't just have 1 or 2 hard bits. There are many missions on multiple difficulties that are very challenging to S rank. Some of these S ranks took me many hours, 4, 5, 6 hours just to get a single S rank. Yeah, a lot of them are easy, but there's also a lot of hard ones too. You'll need to be thoroughly familiar with every enemy and area in the game, and will need to demonstrate total mastery over each playable character's weapons and abilities in order to pull this one off. The Platinum Trophy for Devil May Cry 5 will take you through the vast majority of what the base game has to offer, as you'll have to complete the whole game on 6 separate difficulties while obtaining S ranks on 5 of those difficulties. Some missions can be beaten with multiple characters, and the trophy only requires you to earn an S rank with 1 of the possible characters, so a completionist could have additional S ranks by completing every mission with every possible character. The Platinum Trophy will also require you to purchase all available skills and complete all secret missions, of which there are 12. A free update shortly after release gave players access to the Bloody Palace, a wave-based mode introduced way back in Devil May Cry 2, where you must get through 101 waves of enemies. The reward for completion with each character is a special EX taunt skill that provides a significant boost to style points. There is a DLC trophy for completing Bloody Palace with Dante, Nero, and V. The Virgil DLC allows you to play the full game with Virgil, a character well known to fans of the series. This was a paid DLC with additional trophies for tasks such as completing the base game with Virgil, completing the Bloody Palace with Virgil, and purchasing all of Virgil's skills. Completion of the Bloody Palace with Virgil will likewise award you with a special taunt skill. While not a part of the base game, this DLC gives fans of the series an excuse to replay the game as another key character of the franchise. I found myself getting very frustrated going for the S ranks and for this platinum, and while it felt good to finally beat, the platinum felt like an extremely tedious chore. If the S rank requirements would have been just limited to a single difficulty, for example, I could see enjoying this platinum a bit more, While I do think Devil May Cry 5 is a very good game, I would only recommend this platinum to somebody who's truly dedicated to demonstrating their mastery of the Devil May Cry combat system. If you're new to the series or hard games in general, this will likely be a long and agonizing experience. However, if you're a seasoned Devil May Cry fan and want to show off your demon-slaying prowess, this very difficult platinum is a great one to show off in your collection. Only go for this one if you're dedicated to getting very hard platinum trophies. Armored Core is another series that I have basically no experience with, and I'm really not sure why, because I love science fiction, I love space and planetary scale conflicts in games and movies, and I love fast-paced combat. So Armored Core seems like it's right up my alley. The first Armored Core game came out in 1997 on the original PlayStation. Now my older brother, had a PlayStation 1, and I eventually got a PlayStation 2, and have been with Sony ever since, so I would have had plenty of opportunities to try this series out, but frankly I had never even heard of it up until Armored Core 6's release. I wasn't really sure what to expect with Armored Core 6. I knew it was developed by From Software, but I also knew that it was different in a lot of ways from most of their other popular titles. I was looking for something a little less painful to balance out the difficulty of Devil May Cry 5, and with a Metacritic score of 86, I knew Armored Core 6 received generally positive reviews, and I just hoped that Armored Core 6 was a game that I could enjoy the platinum instead of suffering through it like I did with Devil May Cry 5. In Armored Core 6, we play as C4621, often referred to as simply 621, and later known as Raven. 621 is a mercenary in a mech suit who's awakened from a deep sleep aboard a satellite orbiting a planet called Rubicon 3. You eject from the satellite and make your way to the surface of Rubicon 3. Upon landing, a voice belonging to someone named Handler Walter guides you towards your objective, which for now is to scavenge a valid license in order to legally operate on the planet's surface. Near the end of the level, you loot the body of a downed mech with the call sign Raven, which is where you get your nickname that will stick with you for much of the remainder of the game.
Raven. That's your new name here on Rubicon.
Upon picking up the license, you're introduced to your first boss fight, which is a great introduction to the type of game you'll experience for the next 15 hours or so. The game continues with Handler Walter giving you various missions across the planet and providing intel throughout them. Many of the missions given by Handler Walter are just a few minutes long. Go to this location, destroy this thing, collect this data, or defeat these enemies. These missions come through Handler Walter from a variety of factions present on Rubicon 3. You have two massive corporations, Arquebus and Balaam, who contract your services as part of their agenda to exploit the planet's resources. They both have a lot of money and each has their own squad of elite mech soldiers. You will go on missions both with and against these elite mechs, depending on your choices in a few key moments in the story. Next, you have the Rubicon Liberation Front, which is a group of freedom fighters native to Rubicon 3 that are diametrically opposed to the super corporation's exploitation of the planet. Like Balaam and Arquebus, the RLF will introduce you to a few characters relevant to the storyline. Other factions include RAD, which is a black market weapons dealing organization, and the PCA, or Planetary Closure Administration. The PCA acts like a global government with ships in orbit around the planet and massive deterrence measures on the planet's surface, whose purpose seems to be to maintain some kind of order. All of these organizations are vying for control over a resource known as coral. Coral is a highly valuable energy source that was previously thought to have been wiped from existence. You'll also eventually meet someone named Air, who is a Rubiconian, and they'll even send you on some missions. Eventually, conversations between Air and Raven develop the story further as you complete missions, and Air's connection to the Coral and Rubicon is explained more in depth. For much of the game, Handler Walter continues to emphasize completion of the job, and he suggests that by doing these jobs we can buy our life back. The game doesn't really explore the history of the player character or Handler Walter, or their ultimate motivations, but Walter comments on our fried brain in the beginning of the game and suggests that these jobs are a way for us to restore our physical bodies to a past, more desirable state. At the start, it appears we have no loyalty to any specific faction in the game until later on, where we're given a little bit of choice as to what factions we want to favor. And those choices are more fleshed out in New Game Plus and New Game Plus 2, which both offer additional missions that allow us to alter our allegiance and obtain different endings in true From Software fashion. Armored Core 6's setting is probably the closest to the natural human world that we've seen in some time from a From Software game. While Elden Ring, Dark Souls, and to a lesser extent Sekiro invoke magic and supernatural phenomena in their storytelling and gameplay, Armored Core 6 is set in a futuristic world rather than a fantastical one. Some of the weapons are what we might consider experimental, like laser swords and plasma cannons. And I can't give you a scientific explanation for Coral, but there doesn't seem to be any magic. There's no dragons or demons, and there are no cosmic level supernatural deities that you're fighting. It's mostly rooted in physical reality. In Armored Core 6, humanity has permeated throughout the cosmos and become interplanetary. Power is obtained through an almost militaristic might characterized by bigger guns and stronger machines. Supermassive corporations fight against the global government and the local inhabitants to control key resources. So, like I said, mostly rooted in reality. The story of Armored Core 6 is not nearly as convoluted as a lot of other From Software games, and from what I've read online, the story is quite a bit more developed than previous entries in the series, but I would also say that the gameplay, specifically the combat, is still the highlight of this game. I generally prioritize gameplay over story in what makes a good game, and so that's probably why you're going to hear me say that about a handful of games now, but Armored Core 6 truly is a game built around its combat. Combat encounters are fast and intense, and the game gives you a large variety of build options that facilitate experimentation. While other From Software titles focus heavily on melee and magic, Armored Core is all about firepower. Machine guns, laser rifles, energy swords, chainsaws, flamethrowers. Armored Core 6 continues the From Software formula of providing the player with a large selection of weapons and build options that promote specific styles of combat. The mechs are highly modular and allow a ton of options for combat and movement. You can be a literal tank with slow movement but a massive health pool, or you can be a lightweight bipedal assassin relying on speed and quick bursts to take down enemies. Certain builds are better suited for specific combat encounters, especially bosses, but most of the game could be beaten with a wide variety of different builds. Armored Core 6 has its own version of the poise mechanic found in many other From Software games. In addition to a health bar, each character in the game also has a stability bar. When an enemy's stability bar fills completely, they will become staggered, opening them up to taking massive damage. With some bosses, this is an extremely short window of time, which means you need to be near the boss during the fight in order to capitalize. Since the stability bar increases as an enemy takes damage, you're rewarded for hard-hitting or successive and continuous attacks. You have to be dealing damage constantly or the stability bar will recover, similar to how it does in Sekiro. In Sekiro, bosses have multiple health bars and you can use a death blow against a staggered enemy and it'll wipe out one of their health bars. In Armored Core 6, enemies only have a single health bar, but they take significantly more damage when they're staggered, so a timely stagger can make or break a fight. You can also be staggered if your stability meter fills up, so it's crucial that you can quickly stop any incoming barrage of damage. Otherwise you might get staggered and then get wrecked. Upgrades to your AC unit can be obtained through a separate mode called the Arena. While they can be challenging at the start, most of these arena fights can be done pretty early in the game, so you get rather quick access to upgrades unlike a lot of other From Software games. These upgrades will be necessary in making the game and Platinum much more manageable. Parts for your AC can be purchased through the parts shop, with parts becoming available as you complete missions and also as you find them hidden throughout select missions. There's also a training mode that takes you through basic and advanced combat tutorials. And last but not least, the Nest is Armored Core 6's PvP mode, where you can take on other players. I'm sorry to say, but truthfully, I didn't even enter this mode as I typically never play PvP in From Software games. so I can't say much about this mode specifically, but it is there as an option for those who are interested. Like all From Software games, Armored Core 6 has a little bit of a learning curve when you first start it. Enemies, and especially bosses, fire a high volume barrage of projectiles at you, and they're really difficult to avoid unless you're constantly moving and dodging. Most of these projectiles do very little damage in small bursts, especially when you're more upgraded, but they can overwhelm you quickly if you sit still for too long or get staggered. This is a game that requires you to be constantly moving and constantly on the attack in order to succeed. Enemies in Armored Core 6 are incredibly evasive. They will avoid a lot of your gunfire, and some of them will circle you quickly, requiring a quick 180-degree turn to keep them in your sights. There is a timing element to mastering boss encounters similar to Sekiro. Shooting too early or late can mean a missed shot, and in Armored Core 6, ammo is limited, and it also costs money, which you have to replenish at the end of the mission. Dodging too early or late can put you right in the path of an oncoming melee attack that will take a sizable chunk out of your health bar. Once you start to unlock more AC parts and play around with your build, you'll naturally mold yourself into a build that you feel most comfortable with. If that fails, you can always look at a guide for some tried and true powerful builds out there. I played around with a few different build options, and the dual Zimmerman shotguns and dual Morley bazookas eventually carried me through a good chunk of the game. I modified my build in order to clear certain S ranks here and there, but that was my build for the good chunk of my playtime. There are big chunks of this game that felt really easy, honestly, and even some of the boss fights were easily won on my first try. The Platinum requires you to S-rank all missions, of which there are 59. Fortunately, many of the missions in Armored Core 6 are incredibly short, taking less than 5 minutes. For all of these reasons, this really wasn't too bad in terms of difficulty. I think a 6 out of 10 is a reasonable rating, and it's probably the second easiest From Software Platinum I have behind Demon Souls. There's certainly some tough boss encounters, but there are also some very powerful weapons that, if you can learn how to use them at the right times, make some of those encounters much easier. I'm certainly not above using powerful weapons provided to me in the game, so this Platinum ended up being more enjoyable than it was difficult, honestly. At no point during this Platinum did I experience anything remotely close to the pain and suffering I felt with Devil May Cry 5. This Platinum took me just under 40 hours, taking about 10 days in total. You'll have to play through the entire game 3 times for the 3 endings, and then a 4th time for the S ranks, which for most of those missions you'll be attempting them more than once. This will garner you the majority of the game's trophies, and the S ranks are probably the only thing that could potentially give you some trouble. There are also collectibles in the form of weapon and AC parts, as well as some combat logs, which must be obtained by defeating very specific enemies in certain missions. None of these combat encounters are too difficult. You'll also have to complete all arena fights, of which there are 41. These are not too bad, and rank doesn't matter, you just need to win the fight. And actually, winning these fights will give you OST chips, which are used to upgrade your AC unit, and that will also earn you a trophy for obtaining all upgrades. The last 2 miscellaneous trophies require you to complete all training programs from the main menu and to alter the design on your AC unit. This will likely be one of your first trophies you earn if character creation is something you enjoy. In general, I always recommend a brief skim of a guide, especially for trophy hunters, and especially for trophy hunters with a lot of games to get through, or just trying to optimize a little bit and get through games a little bit quicker. The only real missable trophies are related to the various endings, which are all dependent on specific choices within the game, so of course you can't earn more than 1 per playthrough. The trophy for completing all arena fights could be considered missable as well, as the last 3 fights are only available on 1 of the 3 playthroughs, and the arena becomes inaccessible near the end of the story, so it's best to complete that trophy as soon as possible. Beyond these few, the rest of the trophy list is pretty simple and could be easily obtained without the use of a guide. But if you're struggling to get through a specific boss fight or with earning all the S ranks, there are some guides out there that could be a valuable tool to help you find a tried and true build or strategy in order to make some of those S ranks easier. Armored Core 6 is not what I would consider a difficult Platinum, especially compared to the other games that I'll be covering in this series. If you're familiar with From Software games, mech shooters, or any bullet hell style game, This should be a fairly simple platinum to earn. Despite being more than twice as rare as the Sekiro Platinum, I would consider Armored Core 6 one of the easier From Software games to earn the platinum in. And for those reasons, this platinum would not be in my top 10 hardest platinums. There's very little left to theoretically do once the platinum is obtained. If PvP is your thing, you could definitely spend some time perfecting your build and skills against other players. There are some additional data logs hidden throughout the game, but guides for these are pretty sparse online. Likewise, I believe there's also a handful of additional emblems that you can earn beyond the ones you would get from getting the platinum, but I was unable to find a definitive list of all the possible emblems in the game, so I can't say for sure how many there are. But if collecting every possible thing in the game is a priority in your completionist run, these may take some extra dedication to find or unlock. Armored Core 6 is a great game. It's visually stunning and the combat is fast and exciting. The story is fairly easy to grasp while also being isolated from the rest of the series, so it can be enjoyed on its own merit. The difficulty of the game is mostly overcome after the first few hours, with just a few tricky boss fights later on being a potential source of trouble. The S ranks in Armored Core 6 are nowhere near as demanding as they are in Devil May Cry 5, and most of them you'll probably get easily with some trial and error. With a reasonable campaign length, a limited number of missable trophies, and not much grinding required outside of numerous playthroughs, Armored Core 6 has an enjoyable platinum experience that is not too hard and not too grindy. Last but not least, we come to Mirror's Edge. I first played Mirror's Edge back in 2009, which is also the year I earned my first platinum. I earned 9 trophies in Mirror's Edge and only completed about a third of the story. I can't recall why I never finished it, after all it was over 15 years ago. But this was still an enjoyable game to go back to even for an early PS3 title. Developed by DICE, yes that DICE, in 2008, the same year as the first Battlefield Bad Company game, Mirror's Edge was a revolutionary game at the time of release because it was a game built entirely around movement. While in most games, movement is a boring but necessary transition between cutscenes, combat, or other types of gameplay, in Mirror's Edge, movement is the gameplay. The movement is known as parkour, a niche hobby/sport that gained popularity in the mid-2000s, just a few years before Mirror's Edge released. The goal is to get from point A to point B in the quickest and most creative way possible. This usually involves running, jumping, diving, rolling, hurdling, and any other method you might use to clear obstacles. The catch is that sometimes these obstacles are dangerous. Some of these maneuvers provide very little room for error, and when done atop massive skyscrapers, the consequences for misjudging distance or mistiming a jump could be the last mistake you ever make. Parkour eventually became a standard method of movement for many popular games that were known for their movement mechanics, such as Assassin's Creed and Dying Light. While Mirror's Edge wasn't the first game to have parkour-style movement, it was certainly one of the best examples of parkour-style movement done well in a video game. The movement in Mirror's Edge was so well done that the other parts of the game, such as those involving gun combat, which had been DICE's specialty in years prior with the Battlefield games, but it just felt completely out of place in Mirror's Edge. Never before had I played a game that was almost exclusively focused on movement from point A to point B, with a variety of methods, techniques, and shortcuts to get you there. I knew Mirror's Edge was known to be a difficult platinum, but I also knew that it was pretty straightforward. Difficult, yes, but it wasn't buggy or grindy. It doesn't have any missable trophies, it has a short story. I knew earning the platinum was dependent on one thing, and that was mastering the movement mechanics. After struggling so heavily with Devil May Cry 5, I felt equipped to finally tackle this platinum and knock it off my backlog after all these years. The story in Mirror's Edge is simple and concise, and it's certainly not enough to prop up the game on its own. It's extremely short at only about 5 hours or so, and there are only a handful of memorable characters throughout that brief experience. It takes place in a relatively near future, in what I am assuming is an American city based on the language and accents spoken by the characters, where crime is virtually non-existent. But the city achieved this through authoritarian force. The government has strict control over the media and the people who live in the city. The buildings are bright white and the city looks clean and prosperous. Just a few distinct colors pop out against the mostly white city background. Blue walls, orange railings, and bright red objects that only turn red while you're sprinting at them. Red will be an important color that ties directly to the core gameplay. With the government having such a tight grip on communication throughout the city, people hire runners to act as couriers of information. As their name implies, runners run from point A to point B to deliver information from seller to buyer, using parkour-style movement. We play as Faith. Faith is a runner, and during a job she stumbles across a murder. Her sister, Kate, is a police officer and she's also at the scene. We grab a piece of paper from the victim's journal and use it as a lead to progress the narrative. The majority of the story focuses on Faith's attempt to get to the bottom of the murder, which her sister is wrongly accused of, and to uncover a conspiracy between the city's powerful police force and some shady corporate groups, both looking to increase their power and tighten their grip over the city's inhabitants. The story of Mirror's Edge is simple, short, and while not bad per se, it's certainly not the game's best feature. In Mirror's Edge, you'll be jumping from building top to building top, straddling the exposed edges of skyscrapers, and taunting gravity while balancing on narrow steel beams. As with the previous two games I discussed in this video, the game is truly about the gameplay. I can't recall many games that I've ever played that naturally do not have a HUD. This game does not want to distract you from its biggest strength, which is the movement system. There's no quest givers, no convoluted, long, drawn-out story or cutscenes, and no slow stealth sections. The one thing this game does have that feels completely out of place is the occasional gun combat section. You can disarm enemies with good timing, and can literally wield a LMG. Certain missions have mandatory combat sections which really slow down the pacing of the game and feel out of place when compared to the best parts about this game, which is quick movement. The idea of running away from intense gunfire is exciting, but I don't want to have to punch a bunch of armored enemies carrying heavy guns in order to progress in a game that should have been strictly about the parkour movement mechanics. So let's get back to the parkour mechanics, since that is, after all, the best part about this game. I mentioned earlier that red plays an important role while running. Red will indicate two things: the direction you should be going, and also that the object can be interacted with. A red plank sticking off the edge of a building tells you, I need to jump off this ledge. A red wall might indicate, I need to run across the wall in order to bridge a gap. A red fence likely needs to be climbed over to get to where you need to go. Mirror's Edge has no waypoints, no objective markers, no map, not even a HUD. The only things you'll see on the screen outside of what Faith sees is a small reticle in the center of the screen, and the occasional tip, which are mostly limited to the beginning of the game when you're first learning the mechanics. By holding R3, the camera will orient towards your current objective, but that's about it. For the most part, you are just moving quickly through the levels and relying on red visual cues to guide you towards the finish line. It's incredibly simple, and it works beautifully. This is also a game built for speedrunning, which we'll see by looking at the trophy list. Each chapter offers many ways to get from point A to point B, and you'll finish them faster and faster as you find shortcuts and learn specific tricks to increase your speed. Where you might have originally just climbed over a fence the first time, 10 hours later you'll be wall running into a jump, then coil over the fence, landing in a roll, just to save a half a second on the run. Mirror's Edge is a unique gaming experience. There are not a lot of games like it, and the thing that makes it unique is also something that it does incredibly well, which is a sign of a great video game or piece of art in general. The trophy guide on PSN Profiles has this listed as an 8 out of 10 difficulty, and other sites show similar ratings in regard for this Platinum's difficulty. I recall this game getting a lot of attention for its difficulty way back in the day, but honestly, I was way more worried about this platinum than I had any reason to be. I picked this game as the third one for this video almost arbitrarily and was expecting it to be very difficult, but it was definitely easier than I expected. Some of this is certainly due to the fact that I had just gone through a very difficult game in Devil May Cry 5, and I've also played a lot of games since Mirror's Edge first came out in 2008, so my ideas around difficulty and my overall skill level have changed. That said, I still think that this is a platinum that's entirely achievable, and you don't need to be a hardcore gamer to do it. The game is known to be difficult due to the speedruns and time trials, and understandably the word speedrun might scare some people off, and yes, you will need to get through the levels quickly, but there are a ton of speedrun videos on YouTube covering this game. That means that earning these trophies literally boils down to memorizing the quickest path, and you don't need to learn every single tip and trick to get the platinum. Most levels have at least one big shortcut that you can take that makes the speedruns very doable. The time trials are a little trickier, they're much shorter, and are essentially small chunks of the level that must be done quickly with less room for error. These will definitely require some practice. Some of the big jumps require you to be running fast enough, and if you don't have enough momentum, you won't make the jump. Other maneuvers require very quick and precise button inputs to avoid contact with an obstruction that might just slow you down a hair and ruin a jump and ruin a run. The silver lining is that you don't need to get all the stars for the platinum, so there's still a lot of room for imperfection here. I would personally give this game a 6 out of 10 and put it on par with Armored Core 6. Some bits will require some practice, but the trophy requirements are loose enough for most players to get through eventually, and it shouldn't take too long either. This platinum took me somewhere in the 30 to 40 hour range, which is on par with most guides online. In addition to speedrunning all 10 chapters and earning 50 stars in time trial mode, the Platinum Trophy will require 2 full playthroughs, one on easy or normal, and a second on hard. You'll have to do one playthrough without firing guns, and it's recommended to do this on an easier difficulty for obvious reasons. You'll have to find 30 hidden bag collectibles, 3 for each chapter. There are also some miscellaneous trophies for stringing together specific moves. These might not come naturally, but they're pretty easy to do, and there's plenty of videos online to show you where some of the good spots are to perform them. Most of the trophies in Mirror's Edge are pretty self-explanatory. Some of the collectibles are pretty well hidden, but Mirror's Edge is not a big, sprawling open world. Levels are pretty linear, and the game only gives you access to so much real estate, so I think these could be discovered naturally with a little bit of investigative initiative. The speedruns and time trials would be very difficult if YouTube wasn't a thing. There are some maneuvers in this game that I had to pull off for the platinum that I never would have thought were even possible if I had not seen a speedrunner do it. I imagine it would be very difficult to earn this game's platinum without utilizing any tips or strategies for the speedruns or time trials. And I'm definitely not extreme enough to try and get hard platinums without using a guide. Since I only personally gave this one a 6 out of 10 difficulty and I found it much easier than I expected, this one would definitely not be in my top 10 hardest platinums, but I highly recommend anybody play it if they haven't already, especially if you like platformers. It's probably unlike any other game you've ever played, and if you're a trophy hunter, this can be a cool platinum to have from the early PS3 days. Plus, I hear it's a superior game to Mirror's Edge Catalyst, the sequel that released on PS4 in 2016, which I admittedly have not played. There's one big achievement outside of the trophies that a completionist could go for with Mirror's Edge, and that's to get every possible star in the time trials. Even for the base game, this would prove quite difficult, as there are some time trials that you have to be essentially perfect in order to be fast enough to earn the 3 stars. To earn all base game stars, you'll have to perfect 23 separate time trials, plus there's an additional free DLC time trial, and another paid DLC containing 9 more time trials. That's a total of 33 time trials, or 99 possible stars with all the DLC included. Even the hardest DLC trophy only requires 90 out of 99 stars. Obtaining all 99 stars would require absolute mastery over the parkour mechanics in Mirror's Edge. And frankly, I don't think I'm that big of a completionist to care about those last 9 stars, but it would give completionists some additional content to suffer through if they care about a true 100%. You don't need to be a master at Mirror's Edge to earn this platinum, but it will certainly help you to watch some speedrunners online. I got through the speedrun trophies quite easily by following some of their methods. As for the time trials, same thing. And I actually tried to 3-star as many of them as I could while going through them, because ultimately I will be going for the Superstar Trophy, which is a DLC trophy that I previously mentioned for getting 90 total stars. It's a DLC trophy, so it's not required for the Platinum, but it's significantly tougher than the base game requirements. And I only mention it here because it's the sole reason why some of the time trials took me as long as they did while going for the Platinum. I might have spent an hour on a specific time trial, not because I needed to for the Platinum, but because it makes that DLC trophy easier. So I was doing the time trials with the DLC in mind, so I was practicing more on each one in order to get 3 stars instead of 2 stars or even 1. If you don't care about DLC trophies, the time trials will be even less demanding and the Platinum becomes even easier to obtain. And the gaming experience with Mirror's Edge is great. I think Mirror's Edge is a underrated, underappreciated PS3 platformer that still holds up really well in 2025. The game rewards you with satisfying gameplay if you take the time to learn its systems. I definitely recommend a playthrough, and if you are a trophy hunter looking for hard platinums, I think you will definitely be able to get through this one. Alright guys, I went into a lot more details on these 3 games, so this video ended up being substantially longer than I hoped, and thanks to Devil May Cry 5, it took a lot longer to make than I hoped. But that's 2 more games off the original list, plus a 3rd one added. In addition, I've also added a few more games to the list: N++, Outlast 2, and Trials Rising. As always, tell me what other hard games you'd like to see me complete, and let me know if you prefer the more detailed, in-depth breakdown of things like story, gameplay, mechanics, etc., or if you prefer I just shut the hell up and get to the trophies. I've also already committed to the next 2 games in the series, and those games will be Wolfenstein 2 and Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. This will definitely be my biggest challenge so far, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. I'm extremely grateful for every view, every like, every comment, so if you enjoy this kind of content, please leave a like, let me know what hard platinums you're working on right now, and I'll see you in the next video.